The morning sun poured through the huge glass windows of Sterling and Vale, one of London's most prestigious technology companies. Employees moved quickly across the polished marble lobby. Executives carried tablets and folders. Assistants hurried between meetings. Everything looked expensive, organized, and perfect. Then Daniel Carter walked through the revolving doors. He immediately felt every eye on him. Daniel was 38 years old. His navy suit was clean, but it had clearly been worn many times. His shoes were polished carefully, though the leather around the edges had started to crack. He carried a brown folder containing his CV, qualifications, and work references. Daniel wasn't wealthy. He wasn't powerful. He wasn't connected to anyone inside the company. He was simply a single father looking for a chance. His 8-year-old daughter, Emily, was the reason he had accepted the interview. Daniel had been raising Emily alone for years. He had learned to cook breakfast while answering work calls. He had learned how to braid hair after watching online tutorials. He had learned that children could sense worry even when adults try to hide it. Most importantly, he had learned never to give up in front of his daughter. That morning, Emily had hugged him before he left. "Dad, you're going to get the job." Daniel had smiled. "I hope so. You will." "What makes you so sure?" "Because you're my dad." Those simple words had stayed with him all morning. Daniel approached the reception desk. "Good morning. I'm here for an interview." The receptionist checked her computer. "Daniel Carter?" "Yes." "Maintenance supervisor?" "That's right." She pointed toward the waiting area. "Please take a seat. Mrs. Harrington will see you shortly." Daniel thanked her. He sat down and opened his folder. His experience was strong. 15 years in building maintenance, electrical systems, safety management, equipment repairs, team supervision. He knew he could do the job. The only question was whether someone would give him the opportunity. At 9:40, the elevator doors opened. The atmosphere changed immediately. Victoria Harrington stepped into the lobby. She was 42 and the CEO of Sterling and Vale. She wore a perfectly tailored navy suit. Her blonde hair was tied neatly behind her head. She walked with the confidence of someone who was accustomed to getting answers immediately. 2 senior executives followed her. "Move the supplier meeting to 11, Victoria said. "Yes, Victoria. And I want the revised numbers before lunch." "Understood." Then she noticed Daniel. She stopped. Her eyes moved over his clothes. His old shoes. His brown folder. "Is that the maintenance candidate?" Her assistant nodded. "Yes." Victoria looked at Daniel again. "Bring him upstairs." Daniel stood. He followed them into the elevator. He had no idea that the woman standing beside him had once been a frightened little girl. And she had no idea that the man beside her was the person who had changed that little girl's life. The interview room was enormous. A long glass table stood in the center. Victoria sat at one end. 2 department managers sat beside her. Daniel took the chair opposite them. Victoria looked at his CV. "You worked in industrial maintenance for 15 years. "Yes." "Your last position ended 4 months ago. The factory relocated. Were you offered another position?" "No." Victoria looked up. "Why?" "The company closed our department." She studied him. "You're a single father, correct?" Daniel nodded. "Yes." "How old is your daughter?" 8. "Who looks after her while you work?" "I have childcare arranged." Victoria leaned back. "This job can be demanding." "I understand. There may be early starts." "I can manage that." "Emergency call-outs." "I can manage those too." "Long days." Daniel nodded. "I've worked long days before." Victoria glanced at his CV again. "You've been unemployed for 4 months." "Yes." "And you're supporting a child." "Yes." Something about Victoria's tone began to bother Daniel. He remained respectful, but he could feel the interview moving away from his qualifications. Victoria folded her hands. "Tell me why you think you're suitable for Sterling and Vale." Daniel answered calmly. "Because I know how to keep buildings safe. I know how to manage maintenance teams. And I don't leave a problem unfinished." One manager nodded. Victoria remained expressionless. "Everyone says that. I can provide references." "That isn't what I mean." Daniel waited. Victoria looked directly at him. You've had setbacks. Daniel nodded. Yes. Perhaps you should ask yourself why. The room became quiet. Daniel's expression changed slightly. I have, and I don't think losing a job makes someone a failure. Victoria's eyes narrowed. I didn't say you were a failure. You implied it. I implied that successful people take responsibility for their circumstances. Daniel looked at her. I do take responsibility. Then why are you sitting here? Daniel was silent for a moment. Then he answered, because I have a daughter who believes in me. The manager beside Victoria looked uncomfortable. Daniel continued, I'm not here asking for sympathy. Good, Victoria replied. I'm asking for an opportunity. Victoria closed the CV. I don't think this position is right for you. Daniel looked surprised. The interview has only been going for 10 minutes. I've heard enough. May I ask why? Victoria looked at him. Because Sterling and Vale needs people who can keep up. Daniel slowly nodded. I understand. He gathered his papers. Then Victoria noticed something fall from his folder. It was a small, old photograph. Daniel picked it up quickly. Victoria's eyes caught the image for only a second. A young man stood beside a little girl, wearing a red coat. The girl was smiling. Victoria suddenly felt something strange. She stared at the photograph. May I see that? Daniel hesitated. Then he handed it to her. Victoria took it. Her entire expression changed. The little girl in the photograph looked exactly like her. The same eyes, the same small scar near the eyebrow, the same crooked smile. Victoria stopped breathing for a moment. Where did you get this? Daniel looked confused. I took it. When? About 19 years ago. Victoria looked at him. Where? A railway station. Her fingers tightened around the photograph. Who is the girl? Daniel looked at the picture. I don't know her full name. Victoria's voice became quieter. What did she tell you? Daniel thought for a moment. She said her name was Vicky. Victoria's face went pale. Daniel stared at her. You know her? Victoria slowly sat down. The confident CEO who had just humiliated him suddenly looked like someone who had forgotten where she was. She turned the photograph over. On the back was faded handwriting. Vicky, remember who helped you. Victoria stared at those words. Her eyes began to fill with tears. Daniel noticed. Are you all right? Victoria looked up. You don't remember me? Daniel studied her face. I've never met you before. Yes, you have. Daniel shook his head. No. Victoria pointed at the photograph. That little girl. Daniel looked again. She was scared. Victoria whispered. She was me. Daniel froze. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Then memories began returning to Daniel. A little girl sitting alone near a railway cafe. A red coat, tears running down her face. A small paper cup of hot chocolate. Daniel kneeling beside her, telling her everything would be all right. He had been 23. He had been traveling home when he found her. She had been separated from her family. Daniel had stayed beside her until station staff located them. Before leaving, he had given her his blue scarf because she was cold. The little girl had looked at him and asked, Will someone come back for me? Daniel had smiled. Yes. Victoria covered her mouth. You stayed with me? Daniel stared at her. You're Vicky? She nodded. I remembered you. Daniel sat down slowly. I didn't know what happened to you. I became this. She gestured toward the office. Daniel smiled faintly. You did well. Victoria looked down. I did something terrible. Daniel didn't answer. I judged you before I knew you. Yes. I humiliated you. Yes. I assumed you were unsuccessful because of how you looked. Daniel nodded. But you weren't. No. Victoria looked at the photograph. You were the first person who helped me without asking for anything. Daniel's voice was gentle. You were a child. You still helped me. You needed someone. Victoria wiped away a tear. And now you're the one who needs help. Daniel shook his head. No, I need a job. Victoria looked directly into his eyes. That answer affected her more than any emotional speech could have. He wasn't asking her to repay an old debt. He wasn't trying to take advantage of their history. He simply wanted to earn his place. Victoria stood. You'll have the job. Daniel looked surprised. Because of the photograph? No. She placed the CV back on the table. Because after everything I said to you, you still remained respectful. Daniel smiled. And because I'm qualified? Victoria smiled for the first time. Very qualified. Daniel stood. He thought the strange moment was over. But Victoria suddenly turned the photograph over again. She noticed something Daniel had never seen. A tiny handwritten date appeared beneath the message. May 14th, 2007. Victoria stared at it. Her expression changed. That date! Daniel looked at her. What? Victoria slowly raised her eyes. That was the day my father disappeared. Daniel became still. Victoria looked back at the photograph. My family told me he left us. Daniel frowned. I don't understand. Neither did I. She looked at him. But you were there that morning. Daniel nodded. Yes. Victoria's voice dropped. And you were the last person outside my family who saw me before everything changed. Daniel stared at her. What are you saying? Victoria held the photograph tightly. I think you know something about my father. Daniel shook his head. I don't. Victoria looked at the old photograph again. Then she noticed something in the background. Something neither of them had noticed before. A man was standing near the station entrance, and the man was holding a briefcase marked with the old Sterling and Vail logo. Victoria's face went completely still, because she knew that briefcase. It belonged to her father. And suddenly, the interview was no longer about a job. It was about a 19-year-old mystery. A mystery that had followed Victoria all the way into the company she now controlled. And Daniel had unknowingly carried the first piece of the truth in his wallet for nearly 2 decades. Victoria couldn't take her eyes off the photograph. The old railway platform in the background suddenly felt more important than the people standing in the room. Daniel noticed a change in her expression. What is it? Victoria pointed toward the background. That man. Daniel leaned closer. At first, he saw nothing unusual. Then he noticed a figure near the station entrance. A tall man in a dark business coat, a leather briefcase in his hand. Daniel's memory began working. I remember him. Victoria looked at him immediately. You do? Daniel nodded slowly. He spoke to me when, after I found you. Victoria's face tightened. What did he say? Daniel closed his eyes, trying to remember. It was a long time ago. Please. Daniel looked at the photograph again. He asked whether I'd seen a little girl. Victoria froze. What did you tell him? I told him you were with the station staff. Victoria stepped closer. What happened next? He thanked me. Daniel paused. Then he walked toward the station office. Victoria's breathing became faster. That was my father. Daniel looked at her. You're sure? I'd know him anywhere. Victoria took the photograph and studied the man's face. Her father, Richard Harrington, had disappeared 19 years earlier. At least, that was the story she had always been told. He had supposedly left the family after a serious argument with Victoria's mother. Victoria had been too young to understand. For years, she believed her father had abandoned them. Her mother never explained much. She only said Richard had made a choice. Victoria grew up carrying that pain. Perhaps that was one reason she became so determined. She promised herself she would never depend on anyone, never be abandoned, never be powerless. Now Daniel had unknowingly reopened the biggest question of her life. What happened after you spoke to him? Victoria asked. Daniel thought carefully. He asked me something strange. What? He asked whether I had noticed anything unusual about the girl. Victoria's eyes widened. What did you say? I said you were frightened. Daniel paused. He asked whether anyone had been following you. Victoria stepped back. Following me? Yes. Did you see anyone? No. Daniel looked uncomfortable, but there was something else. Victoria stared at him. What? Your father asked me to forget the conversation. Silence filled the room. Victoria whispered. Why? Daniel shook his head. I don't know. The conference room door suddenly opened. Victoria's chief financial officer, Martin Cole, entered. Victoria, the board is waiting. He stopped when he saw Daniel. Then he noticed a photograph in Victoria's hand. His expression changed. What is that? Victoria looked at him. An old photograph. Martin stepped closer. He saw the image. His face became pale. Daniel noticed. You recognize it? Martin immediately looked away. No. Victoria watched him carefully. You hesitated. I didn't. You did. Martin forced a smile. I've got a board meeting to prepare for. Victoria didn't move. Who is that man? Martin looked at the photograph. I don't know. You've worked for Sterling and Vale for 26 years. Yes. You knew my father. Martin swallowed. I knew him professionally. Then you know that briefcase. Martin's expression hardened. Victoria, this isn't the time. It is exactly the time. Daniel watched the exchange. Something was clearly wrong. Victoria walked toward Martin. You told me my father disappeared. Martin looked at her. He did. You told me he abandoned the company. Yes. You told me he left London. Martin remained silent. Victoria's voice became sharper. Was that true? Martin didn't answer. That silence told Victoria enough. Leave. Martin blinked. Victoria, leave the room. He walked out. Victoria immediately turned to Daniel. I'm sorry. For what? For bringing you into this. Daniel looked at the photograph. I think I was already part of it. Victoria nodded. She sat down. Daniel sat opposite her. For the first time, the two were no longer CEO and job applicant. They were two people connected by a strange morning from 19 years ago. Victoria told Daniel everything she remembered. Her father had been a successful businessman. He had been respected inside Sterling and Vale. But shortly before his disappearance, he had become increasingly worried. He started making private phone calls. He stopped attending social events. He warned Victoria's mother that certain people inside the company couldn't be trusted. Then one morning, he took Victoria with him. He told her they were going to meet someone. Victoria didn't remember who. She only remembered becoming separated from him at the railway station. Then Daniel found her. Later that day, her father disappeared. The company announced that Richard had resigned. Victoria's mother accepted the explanation, but Victoria never believed it. Daniel listened carefully. There was something else, he said. What? Your father wasn't alone that morning. Victoria looked at him. Who was with him? I don't know. Daniel rubbed his forehead. There was another car. What kind? Black. Do you remember the registration? Daniel shook his head. No. Then he stopped. Wait. Victoria leaned forward. I remember a symbol. What symbol? A silver lion. Victoria frowned. That doesn't belong to Sterling and Vale. I know. Daniel looked at the photograph. The car had it on the side. Victoria stood immediately. She walked to her desk and opened a drawer. Inside were several old documents. She searched through them. Then she pulled out an old company report. Her hands began trembling. What is it? Daniel asked. Victoria placed a report on the table. There was a logo on the final page. A silver lion. Daniel stared at it. That's it. Victoria's face went pale. The report belonged to a private investment company that had once worked with Sterling and Vale. The company had been dissolved years ago, but one name appeared repeatedly in the documents. Adrian Blackwood. Victoria knew that name. Everyone in London's business world knew it. Adrian Blackwood was now one of Britain's most influential investors. He had connections across finance, property, technology, and politics. Victoria had always considered him a powerful businessman. She had never imagined his name could be connected to her father's disappearance. Daniel pointed at the document. Was he involved with your father? Victoria nodded slowly. Yes. Do you trust him? She stared at the name. I used to. Daniel looked at her. What changed? Victoria gave a bitter smile. Everything. Before they could continue, Victoria's assistant entered. Victoria, Adrian Blackwood is downstairs. Victoria froze. Daniel looked at her. He's here. Her assistant nodded. He says he wants to speak with you immediately. Victoria glanced at the photograph, then at Daniel. Tell him I'll be down shortly. The assistant left. Daniel stood. I should go. Victoria looked at him. No. Daniel was surprised. You're meeting an important businessman. I know. Then I shouldn't be involved. Victoria shook her head. You may be the only person alive who can tell me what happened that morning. Daniel sat back down. A few minutes later, the conference room door opened again. Adrian Blackwood entered. He was in his late 50s. Silver hair, expensive gray suit, calm expression. He looked like a man who had spent decades learning how to control every room he entered. His eyes went to Victoria, then Daniel, then the photograph. For one brief moment, his confidence disappeared. Victoria noticed. So you recognize him? Adrian slowly looked at Daniel. I've seen him before. Daniel frowned. You have? Adrian ignored the question. Victoria, we need to talk privately. No. Victoria placed a photograph on the table. Not anymore. Adrian's expression hardened. Where did you get that? From him. She pointed toward Daniel. Adrian looked at Daniel again. You don't know what you're involved in. Daniel remained calm. Then, perhaps you should explain it. Adrian took a step forward. You should leave. Victoria stood. No. Adrian looked at her. This doesn't concern you. Victoria laughed once. It's about my father. Adrian's face became serious. You don't understand what happened. Then tell me. He remained silent. Victoria stepped closer. You've had 19 years to tell me. Adrian's jaw tightened. You were a child. I am not a child anymore. Daniel watched them carefully. Adrian finally said, Your father didn't disappear because of Sterling and Vale. Victoria's eyes narrowed. Then why? Adrian looked toward Daniel. Because of him. Daniel stared. Me? Adrian nodded. You were the last person your father trusted. Daniel was stunned. I had never met him before that morning. That isn't true. Daniel shook his head. I don't remember meeting him. Adrian's expression changed. You don't remember because you were never supposed to know. Victoria looked between them. What are you talking about? Adrian took a slow breath. Your father was investigating financial fraud inside the company. Victoria's face hardened. He was trying to expose someone? Yes. Who? Adrian didn't answer. Daniel suddenly remembered something. That morning at the station, Richard Harrington had given him something. Daniel had completely forgotten. A small envelope. He remembered the man pressing it into his hand. Daniel had assumed it was a simple thank you note, but he had never opened it, because later that day, he had lost track of it. Daniel suddenly stood. I remember. Victoria turned. Remember what? Your father gave me an envelope. Adrian's face changed dramatically. What? Daniel looked at him. He gave me an envelope. Adrian stepped forward. Where is it? I don't know. Adrian's expression revealed fear. Victoria noticed. You know what's inside. Adrian said nothing. Daniel continued. I might have something else. He reached into his jacket. He pulled out his wallet. Then he removed the old photograph. Behind it was another thin piece of paper. Daniel had never noticed it before. Victoria took it. It was folded several times. She opened it. There were only 3 words. Trust a stranger. Victoria stared at the message. Then she looked at Daniel. Her voice trembled. My father wrote this. Adrian took a step backward. Victoria immediately noticed. You're afraid. Adrian shook his head. No, you are. Daniel looked at the old message, then at Adrian. Why would Richard tell his daughter to trust a stranger? Adrian didn't answer. Victoria suddenly understood. The stranger wasn't Daniel. It was someone else. Someone her father expected her to meet years later. Someone connected to the mystery. Someone who had been watching events unfold from a distance. Victoria looked at Daniel. Do you know what your old photograph means? No. She pointed at the writing. My father knew you would eventually meet me again. Daniel looked confused. That doesn't make sense. It doesn't have to. Victoria folded the paper. Not yet. Then her assistant rushed into the room. Victoria, there's an urgent message. What is it? The board has received evidence that someone inside Sterling and Vale has been transferring company funds for years. Victoria stared at her. How much? The assistant hesitated. Millions. Victoria looked toward Adrian. He was silent. Daniel noticed something else. Adrian wasn't surprised. He looked frightened. Victoria's voice became cold. Who has access to those accounts? The assistant answered. Only a handful of senior executives. Victoria thought about Martin Cole. Then she looked at Adrian. Then at Daniel. Suddenly, the photograph no longer seemed like a memory. It seemed like a warning. And the most shocking discovery was still ahead. Because when Victoria checked the old company records, she would find that Daniel's name had appeared in her father's investigation 19 years earlier. Not as a suspect, not as an employee, but as the person Richard Harrington believed could one day save his daughter again. Victoria stood completely still. Daniel's name was sitting inside an old company file that had been untouched for 19 years. She looked at the document again. There it was. Daniel Carter, witness. But beneath his name was another handwritten note. If anything happens to me, make sure he is never blamed. Victoria looked at Daniel. What does this mean? Daniel shook his head. I have no idea. Adrian Blackwood remained silent. Victoria turned toward him. You know. Adrian slowly lowered his eyes. Yes. Daniel stood. Then tell us. Adrian looked at Victoria. Your father was trying to expose a group of people who were stealing money from Sterling and Vale. Victoria's expression hardened. Who? Senior executives. How many? Enough to control the company. Daniel asked, why was my name in the file? Adrian sighed. Because your father trusted you. I barely knew him. You knew enough. Daniel looked confused. Adrian continued. Your father believed that ordinary people were harder to control than powerful executives. Victoria stared at him. What does that have to do with Daniel? Adrian looked at the old photograph. Your father saw Daniel helping you at the station. Daniel remembered the moment. He watched us. Yes. Why? Because he needed someone he could trust. Victoria's eyes widened. Her father had not accidentally been at the station. He had been watching Daniel. And when Victoria became separated from him, Daniel had stayed with her. That was the moment Richard decided Daniel was trustworthy. Adrian explained that Richard had placed evidence inside an envelope. He planned to hand it to Daniel because he feared the people investigating him. But before he could explain everything, someone arrived. Daniel had taken Victoria to the station office. Richard disappeared soon afterward. The envelope was never recovered. Until now. Daniel looked at Adrian. You said, I was the last person your father trusted. Yes. Then why did he disappear? Adrian hesitated. Because someone betrayed him. Victoria's voice became cold. Who? Adrian looked at her. Your mother? The room became silent. Victoria looked shocked. My mother? Adrian nodded. She believed Richard was destroying the family. Victoria shook her head. No. She didn't know the entire truth. Then what happened? Adrian explained that Richard's investigation had uncovered a financial network involving several senior executives. But he also discovered that someone close to him was unknowingly helping them. Victoria's mother had signed several documents without understanding what they were. The executives used her name to move money. Richard confronted them. He planned to expose everything. Then he disappeared. Victoria struggled to process it. My mother thought he abandoned us. She believed that. Did he? No. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. He never left us? Adrian shook his head. He was trying to protect you. Daniel looked at the photograph. Suddenly, everything made sense. The frightened little girl, the father who disappeared, the stranger who helped her, the old message. None of it had been random. Victoria sat down. For years, she had carried anger toward a father she believed had abandoned her. Now she discovered he had spent his final days trying to protect her. Daniel sat beside her. You don't have to figure everything out today. Victoria looked at him. I've spent 19 years believing the wrong story. Daniel replied, sometimes people survive by believing whatever explanation hurts the least. Victoria smiled sadly. You always know what to say. Daniel smiled. Having an 8-year-old teaches you patience. Victoria laughed softly. It was the first genuine laugh Adrian had heard from her in years. Then Daniel's phone rang. It was Emily. Daniel answered. Hi, sweetheart. Victoria watched him. His entire personality changed. The strict, serious man from the interview suddenly became warm. Did you eat your lunch? Emily said something. Daniel laughed. You're supposed to eat the sandwich, not just the crisps. Victoria smiled. She realized something. Daniel had everything she had spent years trying to buy. A family connection. A child who trusted him. A life built around people instead of power. When Daniel ended the call, Victoria said, She sounds wonderful. She is. Does she know about today? No. Daniel smiled. She only knows her dad might have a new job. Victoria looked at him. He definitely does. Daniel laughed. Then Victoria's phone rang. It was the board chairman. She answered. Hello. The man's voice was tense. We've identified the executive responsible for the missing funds. Victoria stood. Who? Martin Cole. Victoria's face became serious. Are you certain? We have the records. She ended the call. Daniel immediately understood. Martin. Victoria nodded. The same man who had entered the room earlier. The same man who had reacted strangely to the photograph. The same man who had worked at Sterling and Vale for decades. Victoria looked toward Adrian. Where is he? Adrian answered, If he's smart, he's already leaving. Victoria picked up her phone. Security? Her assistant answered. Martin left 10 minutes ago. Victoria's expression hardened. Find him. Within minutes, security confirmed that Martin had attempted to access a private archive. Victoria and Daniel went downstairs. The archive was located beneath the main administration floor. Martin was standing beside a cabinet. He turned when Victoria entered. His face showed no surprise. I wondered how long it would take. Victoria stared at him. You stole from this company. Martin smiled bitterly. I protected this company. You stole millions. I kept it alive. Daniel stepped forward. You were involved with her father. Martin looked at him. You shouldn't be here. Daniel answered, I've been involved since the day I met him. Martin's expression changed. You don't know what Richard wanted. Victoria interrupted. Tell me. Martin looked at her. Your father wanted to destroy everything. He wanted to expose corruption. He wanted revenge. Victoria shook her head. You're lying. Martin looked at Daniel. Ask him what Richard gave him. Daniel stared. The envelope? Martin smiled. Yes. You know about it? I was there. Daniel froze. Martin continued. I watched your father speak to you. Victoria's eyes widened. You followed him. Yes. Why? Because I needed to know where the evidence was. Daniel suddenly remembered the envelope. Martin had been watching. Daniel had taken Victoria to the station office. Richard had approached him. Then someone called his name. Daniel remembered turning. A man was standing behind him. Martin. Daniel's memory suddenly became clearer. Martin had said, Give me the envelope. Daniel had refused. Then Richard had stepped between them. The memory was incomplete, but it was enough. Martin had been there. Victoria looked at him. You were the reason my father disappeared. Martin shook his head. No. Then what happened? Martin looked exhausted. Your father escaped. Victoria stared. Escaped? Yes. He was alive? For some time. Daniel looked shocked. Where did he go? Martin hesitated. Manchester. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. You knew. I found out years later. Why didn't you tell me? Because I was afraid. Of whom? Martin looked at Adrian. Victoria followed his eyes. Adrian closed his eyes. Victoria suddenly understood. There were more people involved. Martin nodded. Much more powerful people. Adrian stepped forward. That's enough. Martin looked at him. No. Then he turned to Victoria. Your father left instructions. What instructions? Martin reached into his coat. He pulled out a small envelope. Victoria stared at it. Where did you get that? Your father sent to me. When? 6 years ago. Victoria's voice broke. 6 years. Martin nodded. He wanted you to know the truth when you were ready. Victoria took the envelope. Her hands trembled. She opened it. Inside was a letter. The handwriting was unmistakable. Her father's handwriting. Victoria read silently. The letter explained that Richard had never abandoned her. He had stayed away because people connected to the company were still watching. He had built a quiet life under another name. He had followed Victoria's career from a distance. He had watched her become CEO, and he had waited. At the end of the letter were several words. If you ever meet Daniel Carter again, trust him. He reminded me that people can still choose kindness when they have nothing to gain. Victoria couldn't hold back her tears. Daniel looked away respectfully. Then Victoria noticed one final sentence. My greatest mistake was believing money could protect my family. Daniel showed me that people protect people. Victoria folded the letter. For years she had believed wealth was the answer to everything. Now her father's final message was telling her the opposite. She looked at Daniel. I treated you terribly. Daniel smiled. You already apologized. I mean it again. I know. Victoria held out her hand. Daniel shook it. This time, there was no power imbalance. No CEO. No job applicant. Just two people whose lives had crossed twice. Once when Victoria was a frightened little girl, and again when she had become a powerful woman who had forgotten what that little girl needed. Victoria offered Daniel the maintenance supervisor position, but Daniel asked for something unexpected. I'll accept. Victoria smiled. But I want one condition. What? I don't want special treatment. You won't get it. I want the same salary and expectations as everyone else. Victoria nodded. Agreed. Daniel smiled. And I'd like flexible hours on school days when possible. Victoria laughed. That's reasonable. Then she added, and I want you to teach me something. Daniel looked surprised. What? How to stop becoming the person I was this morning. Daniel smiled. You don't need me to teach you that. Victoria looked at him. You're right. She glanced at the photograph. I just needed to remember who I used to be. Weeks later, Daniel officially started working at Sterling and Vale. He quickly earned the respect of the maintenance team. He didn't demand attention. He simply worked. He fixed problems. He listened. He treated junior employees with respect. Victoria noticed something else. Whenever she became impatient, Daniel reminded her to slow down. Whenever she judged someone too quickly, he reminded her of their first interview. Eventually, Victoria changed. Not because Daniel rescued her. Because she finally understood that success wasn't about becoming untouchable. It was about remaining human while becoming powerful. One bright Saturday afternoon, Victoria visited Daniel's home. Emily opened the door. She looked at Victoria curiously. Are you my dad's boss? Victoria smiled. I used to be. Emily frowned. What does that mean? Daniel laughed. It means she's still my boss. Victoria looked at Daniel. Unfortunately. Emily giggled. Then she noticed the old photograph in Victoria's hand. Who's that little girl? Victoria looked at the picture. She smiled. Me. Emily looked surprised. You were little? Very little. Who is the man? Victoria looked at Daniel. Your dad. Emily stared at her father. You knew her when she was a kid? Daniel nodded. A long time ago. Emily smiled. Dad, you really are good at meeting people. Everyone laughed. Victoria looked at Daniel. For the first time, she understood the real meaning of the photograph. It wasn't about wealth. It wasn't about a CEO. It wasn't even about a forgotten mystery. It was about one simple act of kindness. A young man had helped a frightened little girl without expecting anything in return. 19 years later, that same little girl had become a powerful CEO, and without knowing it, she had nearly punished the very man who once protected her. But life gave Victoria another chance. A chance to recognize him. A chance to apologize. and a chance to become the kind of person her younger self would have trusted. The old photograph eventually found a permanent place on Victoria's office desk, not because it represented her wealth, not because it reminded her of her father's mystery. It reminded her of something far more important. Never judge someone's worth by what they have, because sometimes the person sitting across from you with an old suit, worn shoes, and a simple folder may be carrying the most valuable thing in the world, a memory, a promise, and the kindness that once changed your life. Daniel never became rich because of Victoria. He didn't need to. He had something he valued more, his daughter, his dignity, and the knowledge that one small act of kindness could travel across 19 years and return when someone needed it most. Victoria became a better CEO. Daniel became one of Sterling and Vale's most respected managers, and the photograph remained between them as a quiet reminder. The little girl had never forgotten the man who helped her, and the man had never forgotten the little girl he once promised would be all right. Sometimes, the people we meet for only a few minutes can leave fingerprints on our entire lives. And sometimes, years later, life brings those people back to remind us who we really are.